Good morning, friends and neighbors. This is Steve Sparks with another edition of Celebrating Democracy. I want to return now to my mother in Long Beach, California in the fall of 1942. She's on a train now with her son, Jerry, who's barely a year old, or a little over a year old then in November, the fall of 1942. While Vernon is still over in Oahu, and she still didn't know exactly when he would get home. So I take you back then with this story. While little Jerry slept in her arms, Marcella was transfixed on the beauty of Southern California. She so enjoyed traveling the country on a train. Marcella remembered the fun caboose stories as a kid growing up in St. Paul. Oh, she said, the orange groves, she thought while smiling. Marcella loved fresh fruit. Marcella always had strong faith and hope for her new family. Vernon was coming home, she screamed with tears and joy, but so silently as her little precious boy was asleep. And Jerry was smiling as he was held close and lovingly by his mom. He knew he was safe and secure. Little Jerry knew he was loved. After all, Marcella thought, I can't imagine Vernon going back to war after Pearl Harbor. Little did she know that Vernon was already assigned to the newly commissioned USS Belgrove LSD-2. The Belgrove would be commissioned in February 1943. Vernon would be promoted to boatswain mate chief in April 1943. A secret mission to the Pacific was already in the making, and for many months, starting right after the Pearl Harbor bombing. Vernon could not share any of this with Marcella, and she knew it. It didn't take Marcella long to refocus back then and stand on her own. She's a mom, a military mom, and a spouse. She had a World War II mission too, and that was keep the home fires burning. Marcella believed she served too, her family served, and her grandparents served in World War I. She and Vernon toughed it out during the Great Depression as poor families. Then Marcella looked out the window. She looked up and observed the tallest mountain peaks near Fresno, California. She never saw mountains that tall before. Someone a couple of seats up yelled with excitement, Yosemite National Park is up there. It was at that moment Marcella looked down at little Jerry and said softly but firmly, we can do this, son. We can do this, as the tears flowed down her face. Marcella could cry back then, but that would change once there were no more tears to share or shed. From this moment of reflection, Marcella knew she was heading into fighting a war herself. Marcella would come to know hard combat as a warrior spouse. The war would come home to the kitchen table every night for dinner. Vernon would be at war with himself. But she had no awareness or training on what she heard as battle fatigue. Battle fatigue. Vernon was diagnosed with this condition we didn't understand back then. Battle fatigue sounded like, she thought, Vernon would need lots of rest before going back to sea. Maybe the Navy command would keep her husband home for a while. Little Jerry needed to know his daddy. Marcella again tried to put those worries aside. She had to think about caring for her husband and her young son. Marcella knew Vernon would come home a different man. Will I even know him? She thought. Marcella returned to a more hopeful and positive thoughts. She dreamed of getting their new, larger home in San Francisco ready for Vernon's arrival. When Jerry saw any sailor in uniform back then, he would yell out a sweet version of "Daddy, Daddy" to every sailor he saw while on errands with his mom. Jerry would not get to know his father on this visit home. That would come much later. In fact, it would not be until June 1945, the very end of World War II. It was just like that for tens of thousands of men and women who fought around the war for our freedoms. Vernon's story repeats itself for thousands of military families all over the globe who loved ones served years in hard combat. How can the human mind survive this kind of torture? We know more now, but not then. I believe we did because we fought together as one community of people. We fought for all of us, not just some of us. So I'll take a deep breath, look outside at the beautiful fall colors in our backyard. It's a sunny day in Little Whale Cove, Oregon, a beautiful day. And I have lots of hope for the future. So I'll leave that with you, and please think about that. Think about your parents, your grandparents. Go back in time a little bit. I know it helps me with a perspective and context I didn't have 10 years ago when I started researching my family's war legacy. Catch up with you later, folks. Have a good day.